Hi, and welcome to week 4, lecture 4 of English Linguistics 315. We are going to continue with articulatory phonetics, and in this week, what we will be doing is we will be wrapping up this module, articulatory phonetic module, and we will be talking about the vowels of the English language, and then we will continue on to the first lab section of this class, which is going to be the articulatory phonetics lab section. So just to give you a quick review of what we did in the previous week in this class, we started talking about the articulatory phonetics of consonants, and we saw that there are 4 parameters for defining consonants. So can you tell me what the 4 parameters of defining consonants are? Yes, the 4 parameters of defining consonants are nasality. A consonant can either be nasal or oral. The voicing parameter, the consonant can be either voiced or voiceless. And then we can also define a consonant on the basis of their place of articulation and their manner of articulation. Can you name the place of articulation of p, s, and h? S and h. So p, the place of articulation is bilabial because you're using your lips to produce the sound. S is an alveolar because that's the alveolar ridge is the place that the tongue is touching when you're producing the sound, and h is a glottal. Can you name the manner of articulation of m, p, l, and k? M is a stop because there's a complete closure of the air as it's coming out of your mouth. P, f is a fricative. L is a lateral, and k is a stop again. And can you pronounce the retroflex approximant of English? Yes, it's the or the rolled R, which is a retroflex approximant of English. All right, so now we are going to get into the topic for this week, which is the articulatory phonetics of vowels. And just like how we have 4 different parameters for consonants, we also have 4 different parameters for vowels. So let's look at what these 4 parameters are. The first one is called the tongue height. And this has to do with how close to the roof of the mouth is your tongue. And then you have tongue backness, which is how far back in your mouth is your tongue. And then you have lip rounding. Are your lips rounded or unrounded during the production of this particular vowel? And tenseness, that is how tense the tongue is. We will see each of these parameters in detail, and by doing so, we'll also exhaustively see the list of vowels in English. So it's very common for a lot of people to actually think that there are only 5 vowels in the English alphabet. So that's A, E, I, O, U. And it's a very common misconception because, yes, there are only 5 vowels in spelling, but when you actually look at production and pronunciation of these vowels, there is much, much more than just these 5 vowels in the English language. So that's what we are going to discover in today's lecture. The first parameter that distinguishes vowels from each other in English is called as vowel height. Now, what do I mean by vowel height? So remember we talked about how the tongue is really crucial in the production of both consonants and vowels, but especially for vowels because it really depends on what position the tongue is in your mouth. That's really what is going to give you all these different vowel sounds of English. So height of the tongue is the distance between the tongue and the roof of the mouth. So to get an intuitive feeling for this, let's repeat after me the 2 sounds, heat and hat. You can already see that your tongue is actually in 2 different positions when you're producing these 2 particular words of English. When you say heat, your tongue is actually near the roof of your mouth. heat. And when you say hat, ha, your tongue is nowhere close to the roof of your mouth. Your tongue is actually closer to the bottom of your mouth or the jaw of your mouth. So when we are describing vowel height, there are three particular parameters, three particular values that we use. The first one is high, the second is mid, and the third is low. And as you can see, high refers to when the tongue is very close to the roof of the mouth. Mid refers to when the tongue is midway between the roof and the bottom of the mouth or the jaw of the mouth. And low is when the tongue is lowered to the jaw of the mouth. And so here are some examples of vowel sounds that are high in the English language. This is E and U. Written as the English alphabets I and U, right? So the E is in like heat, heat, and U is in like hoot, hoot. And then mid vowels are the A sound like hate, hate, and O sound like hope, hope. I have a note on these two sounds coming up towards the end of this lecture, so just make a note that we will be refining the definition of these two sounds before the end of this lecture. And then low sounds, one is the ah, which is often the A and the E written together, ah and the ah. So ah as in hat and ah as in hot, right? So this describes vowel height in English. You can have the tongue closer to the roof of your mouth, middle of the mouth, and towards the lower position of the mouth. The second parameter to distinguish vowels in English is vowel backness. And this has to do with how far back in your mouth is your tongue. So again, to feel this, to get an intuitive feeling of vowel backness, let's produce heat and hoot. So when you say heat, your tongue is right in the front of your mouth. Your tongue is not in the back position of your mouth at all. Versus when you say hoo, you can feel that your tongue is actually curling into a back position into the mouth. So that's the difference between front of the mouth and back of the mouth with respect to the tongue. We again have three different values for vowel backness. We describe vowels according to how far back in the mouth the tongue is, so closer to the back of the mouth, central, which is midway between the front and the back, and the front of the mouth. So back, central, and front are the three parameters that we use when we discuss vowel backness. So here are some examples of the back vowels of English. So this is oo, o, and ah, right? We already saw some of these vowels when we looked at height. So this is the sound as in oo, as in hoot, o as in hope, and ah as in hot. We already saw all these three vowels when we were talking about tongue height. So we can actually combine the tongue height and the backness and say oo is a high back vowel, o is a mid back vowel, and ah is a low back vowel. And then central vowels of English, and I will tell you that students very often get confused between these three vowels and where to use them. And so let me tell you about the way that I grade vowels. Very often I'm more strict when it comes to grading consonants than vowels because there are different dialects of US English, even just within the Midwest, and different people have different vowels. So if you come from, say, Texas, you have a different set of vowels versus Kansas versus, say, Illinois or Wisconsin. And so when you have students from different backgrounds and students speaking different dialects of US English, it's very difficult to grade down on the basis of the vowels that are being used. So I'm a little bit more lenient when it comes to grading vowels. So don't fret out if you really can't hear the distinction between any of these central vowels because it's a very subtle kind of distinction. So I'm going to use this white board right behind me, and I'm just going to make sure that you can all see it. So I'm just going to move. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. So I'm going to use this to write down the three vowels. So the central vowels are written like that. So that's an upside down V. And this is the sound as in cut, right? Cut. And then you have the schwa sound. This is called the schwa sound. And this is the sound, the second sound as in sofas, sofas, this, right? So it's the sound. And then you have an E sound that's written like that with a cross in the middle. And this sound is called roses. This is the second sound again in roses. That's roses, roses. And this is a high central vowel. So very often students get confused between these three central vowels. And the way that the tip that I give students about when to use which one is that you use the schwa, this guy, this middle guy, whenever your vowel is an unstressed vowel. So what do I mean by stressed and unstressed vowels of English? Well, what I mean by that is basically, wait, I'm just gonna, all right. So what I mean by that is basically stress plays a huge role in determining the pronunciation of a particular word of English. And very often, vowels that do not exist in stressed syllables in English are the ones that get reduced to this middle guy, this schwa. So that's really the way to remember. So if you have a stressed syllable, then you predominantly use either the upside down V or the I with the cross in the middle. And when it's an unstressed syllable, then you very often reduce it to the schwa. So that's the easiest way to remember the three central vowels of English. And then the front vowels are the ones that are produced with the tongue at the front of the mouth. So the examples of these are heat, hate, and hat. And three vowels that we've already seen before. The next parameter is rounding. And the rounding parameter is a binary kind of parameter. So you either have a rounded vowel or you have an unrounded vowel. So when you have a rounded vowel, what it means is that your lips is in a round position. It's in a puckered position when you make this sound. So again, to feel the intuitive difference between these two, say heat, is your lips in a rounded position? No, your lips are actually quite spread out and quite flat. And then when you say hoot, you can see your lip is actually puckering up together into a rounded position. So this is what we mean by rounding. So here are some examples of rounded vowels and unrounded vowels in English. Rounded vowels are things like hoot, hope, and caught, right? And so these are high back rounded. Oo is a high back rounded vowel. O is a mid back rounded vowel, and O is a mid back rounded vowel. And then unrounded vowels are things like E, right? And so a tip for you to remember is that in English, all rounded vowels are actually back vowels. Okay, so it's a good thing for you to remember. And also I have a note about some dialects of English. If you are from Illinois or Wisconsin, you probably may not have a distinction between C-O-T and C-A-U-G-H-T. I say it the same way. I say caught and caught, right? But if you are from any of these northern Midwestern states, you probably have a distinction between COT and CAUGHT. So some people actually say caught and caught, right? So there are two different ways of saying this, and some people actually don't have this distinction. And majority of America actually say caught and caught the same way. The last parameter is called tenseness. And so to understand tenseness, let's again say these words heat versus hit. Now, as you can see, when you say heat, your tongue is kind of doing a lot more work, right? Your tongue is kind of vibrating in this position compared to hit, where your tongue is doing its work and it's moving on to the next sound, speech sound, which is the t, the alveolar sound at the end of the word. So what happens is when you say heat, it's as if the vowel it lasts longer, right, than with hit. So the same thing with sail and sell. So when you have the vowel a, it feels like the tongue is doing a lot more work and the tongue is vibrating a lot more than the other sound, which is sell. So the differences between heat, hit, and sail, sell is that heat and sail are tense vowels and hit and sell are lax vowels. Very often this distinction between tense and lax can be easily understood by students if you think about a long vowel versus a short vowel. We don't have the distinction anymore in English. English actually lost that distinction when we moved from the Middle English era to the early modern English era, which was basically around 1500, 1600 AD. But that's really the distinction that we are trying to capture with tense vowels and lax vowels. So tense vowels are produced with greater tensing of the tongue. So the timing is longer, for example, and vibration is longer. And tense vowels, the tongue is closer to the roof of the mouth. And with lax vowels, it's produced with less tensing of the tongue, and the tongue is further from the roof of the mouth and produced with less duration or length. What we are going to do now is we are going to run through all the tense vowels and all the lax vowels of English. And so we will look at an exhaustive list of vowels of English. Here are examples of tense vowels. So this is E as in heat, right? So this is high, front, unrounded tense vowel. Now you can see that we can define each of these vowels according to all the 4 parameters that we need. So heat, hate, hoot, hope, and hot, right? These are all unrounded, these are all tense vowels of English, and a majority of them are unrounded. So heat, hate, and hot are unrounded, and then you have hoot and hope that are rounded vowels. The tense vowels in English are actually much shorter than the lax vowels of English. So here are the lax vowels of English. So this is the capital I, which is the E sound for hit, and this is a high front unrounded lax vowel. And then you have E, which is a mid front unrounded lax vowel. And then you have A, which is a low front unrounded lax vowel. And then you have the sound like roses, and then the schwa sound as in sofas, and then the upside down V sound as in cut, which are all lax vowels. And they're all central lax vowels. And then you have the oo guy, which looks like a U with like a hand symbol, like both hands like that, which is a rounded lax vowel. And then the o as in cot, which is a mid-back rounded lax vowel. So these are what we call as the pure vowels of the English alphabet, and you can see that there is much more than just 5 vowels of the English alphabet, and we have defined them according to the 4 parameters that we use to describe vowels. Now, these are not the only kind of vowel symbols in the English alphabet. Now, we've talked about the pure vowels, and now we're going to talk about a little bit more complicated vowels, and these are called as diphthongs. Now, when you have a pure vowel, you can see that the vowel starts and ends in the same place. So these are examples of a pure vowel: ba, bi, boo, etc. But when you have a diphthong, you can see that it starts in a different position from where it actually ends, because it's a combination of vowel sounds. So here are some examples of diphthongs in English: buy, boy, and bow, etc. So in English, there are 3 major diphthongs. These are the 3 major diphthongs. They are written, as you can see, with 2 symbols. So the I sound as in I, lie, buy, rye, and the ow sound as in now, how, bow, loud, and the oi sound as in boy, toy, joy, Freud, etc. And so the easiest way to remember a diphthong, or the connection between a diphthong and an affricate, is that just like an affricate, you have two symbols that combines to form the diphthong. Now, the first is a sound that the diphthong starts with, and the second is a sound that the diphthong ends with. And as you can see, in the major diphthong, the second sounds that it ends with are actually approximants or semi-vowels, right? Like the I and the W, etc. Now, apart from the three major diphthongs of English, English also has two minor diphthongs. And these are the ones that I told you that I will come back to at the end of the lecture. And these are the two sounds, the E symbol written in IPA and the O symbol written in IPA. English actually does not have a pure vowel E and a pure vowel O. So scratch them out if you've been making notes from the pure vowel section, because we don't have pure vowels E and O in English. They are actually minor diphthongs. So the way that you would say these are hate and hope, etc. So these are written with the E and the J at the end and the O and the W at the end. So if you look at your IPA handout that I posted on Blackboard, you will see that I have this note in there as well, that we don't have these two as pure diphthong. They are minor diphthongs, and therefore when you do phonetic transcription, you have to use them as minor diphthongs and not as pure vowels. So to get an intuitive feeling for these, I want you to produce lay very slowly, and you can see that your tongue starts out in the E position, but it ends somewhere very different, right? Like the year, right, position. So that's A, right, written as an E and a J, and then low, low, again starts off as an O, but it ends somewhere else as the W, the ow, ow, right? And that's why it's called the minor diphthong. All right, so now you have all the toolkit needed to do a phonetic transcription, which is basically convert an English word into the International Phonetic Alphabet symbol. So I highly recommend that you keep your copy of an IPA handout with you, and we are going to look at two different sentences of English, and then we will do a lot more practice in the phonetics lab video that I will be posting separately. All right, are you ready? I want us to read the following together. Yes, so that's how a phonetic transcription looks like. And I have kind of divided it up according to the word boundary so that it's a little easier for you. And so feel free to consult your IPA and try to read this out aloud. I'll give you a minute to do this. Okay, so what is the first word? As you can see, it's easier to read some consonants better than others. So very often my students often guess the second word and the third word because they look very similar to spelling. So that's must, keep. And the first word is actually phonologists. Phonologists must keep their ears spectacularly clean, right? Because they have to rely on their ears a lot. So phonologists must keep their ears spectacularly clean. All right, now here's another one. So that's what you just read. And then here's another one. This is a little easier than the previous slide. Yes, that's right. Today is a beautiful day in Wichita. All right, today is a beautiful day in Wichita. All right, so that's where we are going to end today's Vowel video, and I will see you in the Phonetics Lab video soon.